Sometimes the darkest secrets have a way of coming back into the light. It's one of America's most infamous unsolved crimes. One without any leads until a second grader makes the find of a lifetime.
In 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram is out with his family camping along the Columbia River in Washington State. It gets cold out, so Brian's father tells him to head down to the river to where the sand is, clear a spot, and build a fire.
While he's smoothing the ground for the fire pit, Brian's arm brushes up against something. He immediately recognizes a signature distinctive green, and he produces a stack of $20 bills.
It's more money than he's seen in his life. So he calls his dad over, they start to count the cash, and altogether, Brian has found $5,880. That's the equivalent of over 20 grand today. But some of these bills have rotted away down to the size of playing cards.
They don't know if the money is real, counterfeit, lost, or stolen. They decide that they have to call up the authorities.
They stuff the cash in a plastic bread bag, and when they get home, his dad calls the FBI.
Soon agents show up and collect the money.
The FBI run the serial numbers on the dollars through their database, and what they find is shocking.
The cash is associated with one of the most well-known crimes in recent American history, the D.B. Cooper hijacking.
Back in 1971, a man who is later known as D.B. Cooper buys a one-way ticket from Portland to Seattle. He sits in the last row of the plane, and after the plane takes off, has a drink, and then casually passes a note to a flight attendant.
The note read, "I have a bomb." Then he opened his suitcase and showed what looked to be a very real bomb. And at that moment, it became a hijacking. He contacts authorities and demands $200,000 and a parachute.
With lots of innocent people on board the aircraft, and with no way of knowing whether or not D.B. Cooper's supposed bomb was real or not, the authorities had no choice but to play along.
Authorities get the money and the chute together. The plane touches down in Seattle. D.B. Cooper makes good on his word and lets the hostages go, picks up the money and the chutes, and the plane takes off again.
Shortly after the plane takes back off into the sky, Cooper parachutes out of the plane over the Pacific Northwest, never to be seen again. And neither is the money, until now.
Almost a decade after the hijacking, Brian Ingram is the first and only person to find any of D.B. Cooper's loot. This instantly becomes the FBI's best piece of evidence in the infamous crime.
So how does the stolen cash end up on the shores of the Columbia River?
Some claim that Cooper landed in the river and the cash floated downstream. Others suggest that Cooper buried the cash on that part of the beach and would come back to it later. Others even accuse the Ingrams of working in cahoots with Cooper by finding this little bit of money as a way to throw the authorities off of D.B. Cooper's trail.
Now, despite the speculation, Brian is a hero among his fellow second graders. But unfortunately, this epic monetary find does not make him rich. The FBI tells Brian he can't keep any of the money he found because it's evidence.
What follows is this multi-year court battle where Brian ends up getting to keep half the money. The rest goes to the airline's insurance company.
Now, Brian hangs on to this money until 2008, when he ends up auctioning off 15 of those bills, which have a face value of about $300. But for collectors, they're pieces of an unsolved case, and they're worth much more to them. At the auction, these bills end up going for about $37,000.
To this day, not a single additional bill from Cooper's ransom has been recovered. And the hijacking remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in commercial aviation history.
Years later, a shop owner stumbles on another set of mysterious criminals. This time, a couple you'd never suspect.
In 2017, a New Mexico antique shop owner named David Van Auker is browsing an estate sale of a recently deceased pair of school teachers named Jerry and Rita Alter. He combs through some various knickknacks, pieces of art, and tchotchkes.
David picks up a few inexpensive items. He also picks up an old abstract oil painting of a woman. All in all, he spends about $2,000, and he thinks he can make some money off of it if he cleans up the oil painting and a few of the other items.
Van Auker throws everything in the back of his truck, and when he gets back to his shop, he leans the painting in the back. Less than an hour later, a customer approaches David and tells him that the painting looks an awful lot like the work of a famous Dutch-American abstract painter by the name of Willem de Kooning.
De Kooning became really popular after World War II in the abstract expressionism movement, and his paintings have sold for millions of dollars. So it's pretty surprising that two retired school teachers would own an original de Kooning.
After being offered $200,000 for the painting by a customer, Van Auker hides the work in his bathroom and begins researching de Kooning. What he finds piques his interest.
Sure enough, he soon finds a de Kooning painting called Woman Ochre that looks just like the one he's propped up next to his toilet. And as he reads about Woman Ochre, he finds out it was stolen from the University of Arizona Museum of Art.
Van Auker is shocked. Could he really be in possession of a stolen masterpiece?
He doesn't want to get into any trouble, so he calls the Arizona Museum and speaks to the curator. She tells Van Auker to keep the painting safe, and she'll be there to have a look at it the next day.
Understandably, he is freaking out. The next day, museum officials visit him to inspect the painting. And sure enough, it is the original Woman Ochre. That means it's worth just a little more than the $2,000 he spent on it. It's valued at $150 million.
Turns out the painting was stolen during a bold museum heist nearly 35 years earlier.
The day after Thanksgiving in 1985 was a pretty slow day at the University of Arizona Museum. Shortly after opening, a man and woman entered. They were sort of acting kind of strange and oddly, and they only stayed around for about 15 minutes.
A little while later, as museum security guards made their rounds, they discovered the unimaginable. One of their most prized paintings, Woman Ochre, had disappeared.
Whoever stole it cut it right out of its frame and walked out the front door. At least that's what officials assume happened, because at the time, the museum didn't have security cameras.
The museum staff provided a description of the odd couple to the police and mentioned also seeing a red sports car in the parking lot at about the time that they were in the building.
The couple were really the only suspects, but the police had no idea who they really were. There were no photos, no fingerprints, nothing.
It's not until the estate sale, over 3 decades later, that investigators are finally able to start piecing it all together.
Police sketches of the suspects do resemble the Alters, and a few old family photos place the couple in the Tucson area at the time of the theft. One photo even shows Rita and Jerry in a rented red sports car.
All signs point toward them as the culprits. But without a living suspect, it's almost impossible to prove it for sure. So David Van Auker returns Woman Ochre to the University of Arizona Museum of Art and declines the reward money.
When authorities look deeper, they start thinking that a few other paintings supposedly owned by Jerry and Rita were also stolen. They're still investigating, but it may just turn out that these two unassuming school teachers were some of the best art thieves of all time.